Over the last 11 months, my systematic investment process has generated returns of over 130% without day trading, without penny stocks, and it only needs to be reviewed once every 30 days. My name is Randall. The featherless bird on my shoulder is Suki, and welcome to 30-Day Investor. Now, before we go any further, I want to be very clear about something. I am not selling anything. The purpose of this channel is to document my trading strategy and the investments that I am investing in, nothing more. With that said, if that's something that interests you, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel, as I will be putting out more videos in the future. Now for some context, I'm an attorney, and for the last 25 years or so, I've been an amateur investor. In that time, I've invested in most types of publicly traded assets. I've done stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs. I've even done some options and futures trading. And let me tell you, with regard to the options and futures trading, not recommended. I've also traded across most time frames. I've done day trading, I've done swing trading, and I've bought and held securities for long periods of time. Now, don't get me wrong, all of these strategies have their pluses and minuses. And honestly, they work for most people. They just didn't work for me. So several years ago, I sat down with the express intent of developing a system that works for me. What I came up with is a systematic way of purchasing 5-stock concentrated portfolios using a quantitative process and holding those portfolios for 30 days at a time. Now, once I had this process in place, the next step was, of course, to forward test it. When you talk about forward testing, think paper trading. So I did. And once I was comfortable with the results, I moved to live capital. Now, as you can imagine, when I told my friends and family about this, many of them asked me to send them the stocks so that they could follow along. And so I did. Over time, that list has grown, and recently it occurred to me that there could be other people who don't have the time, the energy, or the desire to do the research who might be interested in this information. So here we are. Now, before we go any further, I want to be clear about two things. Number one, these aren't penny stocks. Every company that I invest in is a quality company with earnings and a business plan. They must all be U.S. common stocks. They must all have market capitalizations of at least $500 million, and they must all have stock prices of at least $10 a share. Number two, the disclaimer, because I'm an attorney and I like disclaimers. So here's a disclaimer. I am an attorney, but obviously I'm not your attorney, and I'm not your financial advisor. Please remember that investing in stocks comes with substantial risk. So before you do it, you need to make sure you do your research. That's doubly true if your starting point is some guy on YouTube that you've never met. Remember, the purpose of this channel is to document my trading strategy and the investments I invest in. So before we go any further, let's talk briefly about the investment process. So the investment process is a two-step process. The first step tries to answer the question, should I even be in the market? Because honestly, it doesn't matter how good your investments are. If the market is doing poorly, there's a decent chance you're going to lose. So to try and answer this question, I developed a macro model that I run on a daily basis. It takes into account a whole bunch of factors. Think of it kind of like the bouncer at the bar. If you can't get past the bouncer, you're not going to have any fun, but it's also likely that you're not going to get yourself into trouble. Now, currently, the macro model is bullish, which means I'm in the market. However, since it's ran every day and it looks at a number of different factors, that can literally change on a daily basis. The second step in the process deals with a stock selection process. And as I indicated above, this is a purely quantitative process. There's no emotion or input on my side. It basically looks at factors like momentum, profitability, growth, and earnings, and comes up with a list of stocks, and I choose the top 5. So for the one or two of you that are still listening, let's talk briefly about the current picks. So this month, the system has given me a highly correlated group of stocks within my highly concentrated portfolio. Now, to be fair, I don't like that type of thing. I prefer more diversity, but this is a quantitative process, and so that's what I'm doing. It's given me 4 metal miners and 1 pawn shop stock. Now, on a side note, has anybody actually invested in a pawn shop stock before? I went back in my history and I can't see where I ever have. If you have, do me a favor, drop a comment below and let me know what your experience has been like. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so the process has given us 4 metal miners and 1 pawn shop stock. Now, what this tells me is that the system sees that inflation is likely to be an issue for the foreseeable future and that the American consumer is likely being squeezed by that inflation. Okay, so let's talk about the stock picks for a couple minutes. The first stock pick is a company called Kinross Gold, KGC. And what I found interesting about Kinross Gold is when you look at the operating margin, it has an operating margin of 47.17%. Basically, Kinross Gold is turning high-priced gold into operating cash flow. The next stock on the list is Easy Corp, EasyPW, and this is that pawn shop stock that I spoke about before. And what I found interesting about Easy Corp is if you look at the EPS revisions, for every period that Yahoo Finance tracks, it is upward revised earnings revisions. That is a strong indication of a company's quality. Okay, so the next stock pick is Newmont Corporation, NEM. And what I found interesting about Newmont is if you look at the operating margin, as amazing as it could be, it actually has a higher operating margin than Kinross Gold at over 58%. The next stock on the list is Kerr Mining, and that's CDE. And what I found interesting about Kerr Mining is if you look at that same financial highlights list, you will see that it has a quarterly revenue growth of over 120%. 120%. Finally, the last stock on the list is SSR Mining, SSRM. And this has something really unique going on. So management for this company has indicated that they are going to do a $300 million stock buyback. And that really goes a long way to show what management thinks of the company and where it's going in the future. And that stock buyback notification or news is right here. Okay, so those are the 5 stocks. Here's what it looks like in my portfolio. Now, I want to say something real quick. Just because I manage this portfolio on a monthly basis does not mean that every stock is bought or sold. In fact, there are many times where stocks stay on the top 5 for months at a time, and that's what's happened here. If you look, you can see that Kerr Mining, CDE, was actually bought in November, and Kinross Gold, KGC, was bought in December. Assuming the bouncer doesn't knock me out of the market, I don't intend to sell these stocks. I'm just going to let the math do the work. Okay. So listen, if this type of thing interests you, or for that matter, if you just want to see if I crash and burn, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Also, I'm going to be putting out some additional videos based on questions that I've received from friends and family. So if you're interested in those videos, do me a favor and set up the notifications because they're not going to be coming out on a regular basis. With that said, one last thing. When my friends and family ask me about this process, I tell them the most important thing is that there's no emotion in this process. It's just execution. And I will see you around March 25th.